Good morning, everybody. What is up? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020, Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on November 24th from Toronto, a part of Toronto. I'm in Toronto, but we have a truly international conversation here. We have Black men from Canada, the United States, and England. And this is a first for the morning vibe, but promo. I do this every month also with a conversation called Black Men Talking, where we have Black men from Canada, the US, and England. But let's get some homework out of the way. First things first, please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. And when you do, hit the subscribe button and the notification button. Also, make sure that you do this, that you follow the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also, if you'd like to promote your business, product, or service on any of the platforms I host, please feel free to email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. And finally, we love to keep the conversation in between the Monday show and the Friday show. The best way to do that with us, email me at my email address again, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com, and it'll get you to part of our Discord group. So before we go any further, actually, I partaked in some of this already this week, but we have a little thing to show you. And if you like eating and you're in Canada and you like supporting Black restaurants, we've got something to show you. So just give us a second here. And if you're in that food mindset this week, here we go. Baby. There we go. Buy Black's Black Restaurant Week. Restaurant Week is still going on. I was actually at a restaurant in the Whitby area of the Greater Toronto area yesterday at Vegan Delights. Wow. Impressive. Was hanging out with Roger Dundas, co-founder and publisher of BuyBlacks.com, which is Black Canada's #1 online magazine. Also hung out a little bit with Ryan, my co-host, who should be with us at the bottom of the hour. Who else was there? Also, Russ Cadastre, I hope I got that last name right, who's the chair of the BBPA, Blackness and Professional Association. And we had a few others, Fitness IQ Cam, otherwise known as KSEYL, RWFQ, and Wendy from Convo Media. And there's one other person, I don't remember her name. That's my head, not my heart. But we had a great meal. And actually going out tonight to Sugarcane Restaurant on the Danforth to do some celebrating. And also earlier on this week at Sugarcane Restaurant to celebrate the Toronto media launch of Buy Black's Restaurant Week. So there's the link there. Go there if you have a chance. Go and eat or buy something from one of the restaurants. So that is it. So let's do some shout outs before we get this conversation happening. And there she is, Fitness IQ Cam, morning, and talking about the conversation yesterday. Yeah, at Vegan Delights, the food was amazing. The conversation was just as amazing. And also, thank you. Uju. I forgot the other lady's name. So I covered 90% of the people that were there. All right. This conversation we're having today, I think myself and this gentleman I'm bringing to the stage said like it's 3 years in the making. 3 years in the making. That's hilarious. And you think we'd live on the other sides of the earth. And we probably only live like 2 hours drive from each other. But we've been continuing an epic conversation. And I'm very passionate about the plight of Black men and those who love them, especially Black men. And one of the gentlemen who's I'm going to say tip of the spear, because we're going to use the word champion, but champion's so overused. I like to say tip of the spear when it comes to championing Black men and those who love them, is a gentleman named Tamari Kitossa. And I'm going to bring him on today. We also have some friends coming on, but we're going to spend a little bit of time with Tamari first, and we're going to get into a conversation. So today we're going to bring Tamari on. He's been on before, but he wanted to come back because the thing we're supposed to talk about the first time, we didn't get a chance to talk about. So now we're doing the first thing second. So Tamari, how you doing this morning? Okay, you are muted. Let me just see. No, I got you now. Go ahead. Go ahead. You got good now.
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Vibe. Thank you so
Good
very
morning.
much for having me again.
Pleasure. How are things?
Things are great. Listen, man, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, like the promotion, for various businesses and exposing the wider world to some of the experts and other people with particular qualities that you bring on your show. I think is really important.
Well, thank you. It's not hard work anymore. It's heart work.
Yeah.
It's hard work. So I'm looking forward, and thank you for the kind words. Appreciated and not taken for granted. Before we get into a little bit about the book, can you share a little bit with our audience about you?
Well, I'm a professor of sociology at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, in the sociology department. So I've been there since 2006.
How long?
Since 2006.
I just wanted people to hear that. Go on.
So I'm a transplant to Hamilton. That's where I live with my spouse and 2 children. So my family, immigrants from Jamaica to Toronto in 1973. Did my undergraduate and my MA work at York University and my Ph.D. at the OISE Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto.
Wow. What led you, especially as a Black man, down that educational path?
You know, part of it is when I came to Canada in 1973, within 1 week of being in class, I was immediately put back a grade.
Wow.
1 week, just because of...
That's interesting because, and I don't want to just interject it. I grew up in Little Jamaica. Belgravia Avenue, which, if anyone knows, if you go up Marley, the 2nd Street north of Marley on the right side is Belgravia Avenue. And so we moved, there's a group of our families who moved from there to Scarborough, and I started grade 1 probably around October, and I skipped grade 2.
Good for you.
I guess so. So I just wanted
You're ahead of the curve.
You were put back a grade.
Just within 1 week, bam, just like that. Wow. And keep in mind that the British system in Jamaica was much advanced over that in Canada. And I came from a family of teachers. So my aunts and uncles well schooled me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, that was one of the things that is complex that I grew up with, that I was never smart enough, never good enough, because, you know, there's something about the way that I sounded. So at a certain point, I made a decision to read Malcolm X's autobiography. And when I learned that he made a study of the dictionary, I did the same thing too. So my diction had to be precise. I can code switch when I need to, but generally, there's a way that I communicate that is just a part of now, just the way that I am. But I learned that in part through Malcolm.
How few Black men when you started and still now? How many Black men do you see doing what you do?
You mean in the professoriate? You know, I'm in touch with a small community of Black scholars in Canada, and at this level, there's a small grouping of us. It's a fairly small grouping,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to
Mm-hmm.
stay in touch with some of them as much as I can.
Good, 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 good. Well, let's spend a little bit of time about your book,
Hmm.
and let's get a little background on it. So, what was the impetus for you to write this book?
My own existence.
Wow.
Um, I've spent much of my young adult life trying to figure out how the race code is in part, the race code about Black men is in part about an erotic coding of our bodies, because stuff has happened to me that I just couldn't make sense of. Being grabbed in public, being fondled by police officers when being patted down, and the focus was always on my crotch. So I wanted to really make sense of this. So initially, however, when I applied to do my PhD, I met with a woman scholar, a white feminist scholar, to explain to her the kind of dissertation that I wanted to do. And there was a particular incident where I went to a nightclub at Sparkles at the CN Tower
Oh,
back in the day.
wow.
And
Wow.
back in the day,
Wow.
man, uh,
Okay.
within 5 paces of walking into the club, this white woman just like walked up to me, looked me right in the eyes, and then just grabbed my crotch. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I said to this professor, I want to make sense of how this code doesn't fit the dominant narrative of men as Black men as patriarchs and hypermasculine, so on and so forth, because something happened to me that theoretically reversed the norm of how we understand gender, sex, and patriarchy. And
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, now you know how we feel. And at that moment, I realized, A, this is not the person to do to supervise my work. And that there's something about my narrating my experience did not fit that narrative and that lens, and had to be erased and reduced. So I was dehumanized in that moment, again, from being dehumanized in another moment from walking into that club and trying to make sense of that. So I ended up writing a dissertation where I smuggled some of that in, but I was thankful for my other supervisor who took me on anyway.
Wow. Wow. This anthology, was it challenging for you to okay, so I two-part. Was it challenging first for you to put it together?
Yeah, it was challenging. Part of the challenge was me personally coming to terms with these issues, right? And having to relive it again and again and again. There are other things, but also, so like, this is a project that has been, in part, I kind of avoided it. So when I really got it going in 2014, and I reached out to a number of other people, I made a decision that I was not going to write this book on my own. I needed to have other voices, other perspectives, and my role would be to curate those perspectives and those voices, because this is a worldwide phenomenon. Wherever you have colonialism, imperialism, that what goes with it are narratives and discourses of sex and sexualization. You cannot have domination, subordination, slavery without it being also a sexual project. And so I wanted to have other people narrate from their perspective in their country, in their region, how Black men's bodies are imagined, not simply as a visual spectacle, but also a pornographic spectacle. This is something that we live with. It's marked on our bodies because other people impose that on us.
You mentioned so many knowledge bombs here, but you mentioned also it was difficult. You had avoided doing this. Two-part conversation piece. And what were you avoiding, and when was the breakthrough moment?
I think I was avoiding the pain of what I was living. And, I read James Baldwin regularly and routinely. I read Frantz Fanon regularly, routinely. And so I was narrating my experience to myself through them. I've gone through counseling, been there, done that. It was not a good experience. I remember listening to David Archer talking about his experience, and
Mm.
it was not affirming for me. So I've dealt with this issue myself through Fanon and Baldwin, which is why they are so central to the book. So that was important and why I had difficulty doing this work. But when I read Tommy Curry's The Man Not, that was the moment when I was like, yeah, okay, man, you have permission to do this. Um, so I actually read Tommy Curry's book after I
Oh,
started the project in
yeah. You know what?
2014.
I remember you mentioning that to
Yeah,
me. Yeah, way
yeah.
back when.
It's
I remember
actually
you
my
mentioned that.
it's actually my spouse who is a contributor to the book, Katerina Deliovsky, who said you have to read this book.
What?
And so when I read the book, the veil completely lifted, and it's like I really felt then that I had permission to go full board with curating this book.
Is in so many things there. Isn't it interesting for many Black men to make a forward movement? Our partner is the initiator. What do you
Yeah.
think about that aspect?
That's an important point, which is turning up in the research that I'm doing now, interviewing Black men and their spouses, friends, and families who love them about how they cope and live through these tropes of being sexualized, being presumed as macrophalic, or being presumed as rape prone. I'm really hearing from Black women that volunteered to be a part of this project that Black men are confiding in them. So
Mm.
our intimate partners, when we trust them, they are our confidants. But I also have to say this: I had an interview with a couple, and after 35 years, there's something that this man's wife did not know about him. And he disclosed that in conversation because he trusted me. And she literally had to drop her knife and fork because she was not aware of this aspect of how he was coping with trauma for 35 years and she didn't know it.
Wow.
So there are points in time when there's certain things that are so deeply painful and intimate in Black men's lives because we have to put on a shield, our Gideon suit when we go out that front door, and sometimes in our own homes, that our spouses are really the key to helping us live our whole lives. And that's why I think our spouses, whether they're male or female, it doesn't matter, are really key to our existence.
That's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Uh, I know that you don't want to forget some things. There were some publications or some books that have helped
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
along the way in regards to this book. So I guess the first one I'm going to put up is Rethinking Rufus.
Yeah, so in Thomas Foster's book, this is really small, readable book. This is something that this book people need to have it in their library and to read it. Uh, there was a sketch from the 1880s, late 1770s, early 1880s, of this image that I thought was this. My God, this is the book cover because it really communicates how Black men's bodies, particularly abled Black men, are imagined as always sexual. So that we are imagined as naked, not nude. And I thought this image was so important to have for the cover of the book because you cannot avert your eyes from what is already in our subconscious and it makes it manifest. And I thought that this image that he had in his book was so important that I had to have it on the front cover of my book. But this book really helps us to think through the way in which slavery and buck breaking are essential to how we understand how Black men live our lives. So when you think about, for example, in the city of Toronto, Black men are like 2% of the population of that city. A full 25% of all complaints to the Special Investigations Unit of sexual assault from police come from 2% of the population in the city, which are black men, right?
Mm,
And so there's
yeah,
something about our bodies which needs to be broken, because these sorts of representations give people permission to own our bodies in the sexualized way. And Thomas um, Foster brings us back to that moment of slavery where that was essential for managing and breaking black men's bodies.
great.
The other book is Vincent Woodard's The Delectable Negro. This is a really important book because it shows that there is this, uh, this narrative of seasoning, right? There's a seasoning period in slavery. That's a culinary idea. And so our bodies are consumed in particular types of ways and always situated around sexualization. And his book is really important because he talks about demystifying sexuality, where we look at African cultures and we imagine, for example, that sexuality and homosexuality, however that is imagined, as an imposition on Africa. This was one of the complex ways in which African people lived their lives, fully complicated. And I think his work does a really nice job of demonstrating the complexity of Black sexuality, in particular Black men's sexuality, from slavery onward. And there are two other books that I think are really important. The other is Greg Thomas's book, The Sexual Demon of Colonial Empire. Um, Really important because it talks about how COINTELPRO in the United States was also about imagining Black men's bodies in the Black Power movement as sexually virile that needs to be pacified and dominated. And I think his book really brings us up to date in terms of what that looks like in terms of COINTELPRO, for example. And of course, Tommy Curry's The Man Not.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely fantastic work. Tommy's doing brilliant work. And a lot of the work that he does is around the sexual violation of Black men, particularly in childhood, which is one of the topics that I'm covering in my contemporary research.
Yeah, all the books highly recommend. Tommy Curry, for people, if you ever have time, go to the Dr. Vibe show, put in the search Dr. Tommy Curry. I did that conversation long time ago. Like, if you want to see what this show looked like in its rough days, you go to, but it is probably, I'd say, in the top 10 of the most watched conversations I've ever done. So that means that a lot of people, and Tommy doesn't give that many conversations or interviews. So I was very blessed a very long time ago to get, and actually that gives me interest. I got to reach out to Dr. Curry because he's still in Scotland, is he not?
Yeah.
Wow. And
Yeah.
that's still ongoing. Got to ask him. And I did ask him, Dr. Curry, you left the States for Scotland? Wow.
Well, you know what, man? Like what he's doing is like he's part of a tradition,
Yeah.
right? Haki Madabuti, Earl
Yes.
Fari Hutchinson, Robert Staples, so Tommy Curry is one of those voices that's really amplifying um, ways of reimagining how we imagine Black men, much more empathetic, much more complicated, much more nuanced. And I think he's one of those, T. Hassan Johnson in the United States. So there are a number of men, and Tommy's one of the ones that's most popular.
Yeah.
But he's really important in bringing forward that tradition.
As you mentioned, Haki Madabuti, for people who are passionate about Black men and those who love them, must read book, Black Men Obsolete, Single, Dangerous, the African American Family in Transition. That book was one of the catalysts for me to do what I'm doing today.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If that influenced you, what about Nathan McCall's Makes Me Want to Holler?
It did, but and a little bit of Toronto Black history, especially here. Many years ago in Toronto, there was a bookstore called Burke's Bookstore.
Yes.
I don't know if some people, many people are watching this, probably don't live in Toronto or not old enough to remember the bookstore. And Mr. and Mrs. Burke are still alive today. Two of the great Black heroes, I'm going to say not just for Toronto, but Canada and globally.
Yeah.
And I used to go there on a regular basis, especially after I graduated from university, because most of the stuff in university I had no purpose for, no meaning for. And I remember, and I was a regular visitor to their store and went in one day and saw that book, Black Men, Obsolete, Single, and Dangerous, sat down, read a chapter, sat and said, okay, I'm buying this. I read that whole book in that night and said, okay, I've got to do something. It gave me permission and the impetus to go forward. And there's been a number of Black men that I mentioned that book on this show. And they say, I've got that book, or where do you get that book? Because as much Malcolm X, definitely a book that Black men and those who love them have. That's a book that Black men and those who love should have, amongst many others. But that one, a lot of people don't know about, but when they read it, and it's still applicable today.
A good stepping stone to that book is Earl Fary's Hutchinson's assassination. The assassination.
Yes, another great. Another
short. Yeah.
Earl Fary. Oh, yeah. Wow. And I know for a while, I know if he used to do broadcasts on Facebook. Yeah. I don't know. And I know during the pandemic he was doing it. I don't know if he's doing it now, but there's another, I'm going to reach out to him again. He's never come on here. I'm going to reach out to Earl Fary again and see if he because family, Earl Fary Hutchinson, you got to be ready for him. That's all I got to say, because he does not play.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick little promo break. I'm going to be doing a read ad. And then when we come back, we're going to have two of the contributors to the anthology. We're going to have Delroy Hall first from England. And then after him, we're going to have Leroy Moore from Cali, California. So this is a true international. I think it's the first time we had a 3-country conversation on the Morning Vibe. So let me do this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put something up for y'all just to talk about on today's conversation. So let me just go here. And bear with me, family. I got a lot to do today. So let's do this. Here we go. All right. Frequency Event Promotions has a sale on right now for pull-up retractable branders. A great product, great quality, and a great price at $149 plus applicable taxes. Now, for a limited time, if you call or email Frequency Event Promotions and say Dr. Vibe and Ryan Knight, you'll receive $25 off any additional services that they provide, such as t-shirts, hoodies, business cards. So I'm pulling this off here now, and I'm going to give you the contact information that you can get in contact with to get those special promotion items. I'm going to put right at the bottom here. So call and say Dr. Vibe and Ryan Knight and receive $25 off any additional services such as t-shirts, hoodies, business cards. So email frequencyeventpromotions.com. And I forgot to put the phone number, but most people here are probably doing the email anyways. So I think email would be best. So that is it. My apologies, Frequency Event Promotions. I'll make sure the phone number comes up because you're going to be doing it again on Monday. That's my head, not my heart. All right. So we are back. And with Tamari, make sure I get that right. I was going to say something else, but I didn't get your approval to say it, so I'm not going to say it. All right, so we're going to first bring up Delroy Hall, and I'd like you to introduce Delroy to the conversation tomorrow, if you could, please.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to introduce my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Delroy Hall. I met Delroy probably in 2010, probably 2011 at Caribbean Studies Association conference in Barbados. We've been excellent friends since.
Okay, and Mr. Hall, you need to take yourself off mute and we can get to you.
Good morning,
Bingo.
Everyone.
Good
morning.
Good
afternoon for those who are listening in England.
Well, I'm saying we know there's a future because you're 5 hours ahead of us.
Yeah, there's certainly a future.
So, Mr. Hall, can you just share a little bit of your background for our family today?
Yeah, Jamaican parents, born in England, as I say, of the kind of first generation Windrush kind of generation in the UK. I've been a pastor for 30 odd years, but not so much interested in the black man, but concerned because I'm a black man in terms of my existence as well. So, and also a trained psychotherapist, I remember talking to somebody recently, a sports psychologist, who couldn't believe that such an animal existed as a Pentecostal and a secular psychotherapist. He couldn't believe that such an animal existed. He said, "How did you make it work?" I said, "I just did." So yeah, that's been a tiny
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. I want to find out again from your lens and journey, how many, especially in your country, how many Black men are doing what you do?
Do you know what? In terms of, if you looked at the package, very, very few. I recall being with a friend a few years ago, a very eloquent speaker, a guy called David Shoshone. And he said to me, he said, "Bishop," he says, how many Black guys do you think are in the UK and in different parts of the world with a PhD, trained psychotherapist, and an ordained bishop?" And I thought, well, I'm not sure. He said, "Let me tell you now, not many." In terms of, I guess you've got people doing the pastoring thing, and that's that. And you've got people doing the psychotherapy thing, and people in academia. But bringing the three together, very few of us, I think. Very, very few indeed. Yeah.
This is my last conversation with Chen. Tamari, please join in. But your contribution to the anthology was a very interesting subject, and you talked about beyond the exotic and the grotesque.
Yeah.
Why that title? that definitely caught me. And also I want what Tamari thought when you presented him that title. So you give us the title, then I want Tamari to come in too.
God, it seems so long ago. So I guess it starts off being a 12-year-old boy or 11-year-old boy in a history class in Leicester and being taught the Tudors or the Scots. And I was really disconnected. And I remember being in classroom 8, sitting at the back of the classroom and asking myself the question, God, if you've made Black and white people equal, haven't Black people done anything positive on the earth? Because all I saw in terms of Black images was just negative. So what that did for me, it brought about a level of shame and embarrassment when I saw Black images on the TV. And then in the 70s in England, I had quite a few friends who were sectioned. And when they were then released and they're on these strong medications, I was quite frightened of them. They were almost zombified. And I was thinking recently, as a friend of mine, he was sectioned in the 70s and he's never left the psychiatric hospital since. I am now 64 and he was sectioned in his 20s and he's never left the psychiatric system since. And then part of the other thing that really stood out to me, I travel a lot on public transport, and I noticed on the buses quite often my seat was the last seat to be taken. Just an observation. And I remember that's an observation that went on for years, but I never commented to anybody about it. Then I remember talking to a guy from Grenada. He'd come over to do some studies, tall guy, Black guy, 6'2", 6'3", and he lived with his uncle out in one of the villages in Sheffield. And I shared this story with him, and he told me of a situation whereby he was coming into Sheffield on the bus. Because it was snowing, the journey took 2 hours. He said the bus was jam-packed. He was the only Black person on the bus and nobody sat next to him. And I just thought, what on earth is going on? So then I started to think about the Black male body. And I used to think, when I looked at the treatment of us, I used to think, what have we done to deserve this treatment? Because there needs to be the level of brutality, blah, 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 blah. So I was thinking, what have we done? So then I can't remember how we got the title. I think partly to the conversation with Tamari. There's a friend of mine who works at Duke. And we were looking at, there's an attraction, the Black body, but also there's the ugly side, the grotesque. So I think we played around with the title for a little bit. So at one level, we are exotic by the white other, but also we are seen as a threat and fear by the white other. So this whole thing around sexual desire, but also I've argued that our bodies are also a site of violence. So those two things are projected onto us, which are not part of our deal, but somehow we have to wrestle with it.
Okay, before I ask Tamari to jump in, I just want to say hi to some of the the Dr. Vibe Show family, or the Morning Vibe Show family this morning. Good morning, Opal Inspired. Hope you're doing fine. Good morning, Wayne Harris. Wayne, you can catch Wayne Harris on the first Fridays of each month, and we have that segment called Financial First Fridays with Wayne Harris. We have Sonia Palmer. Thanks, Delroy, for the link. Don't spit it out.
I didn't send it to her.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Sonia.
And also Frequency Event Promotions, who we just did the spot for, is chimed in. Tamari, please join in and add on to the conversation if you'd like. And then in a few moments, we'll bring up Leroy.
You know, the thing that I want to add is to open space for Delroy to comment more on this issue. Speaking to Delroy over the years, so many years, about his practice as a psychotherapist and as a pastor, we had many conversations about how these narratives are affecting the way that Black men live their lives. And suicide was one of the issues that kept coming up, that he was dealing with in the UK and being invited to give eulogies. And I said, man, you have to write about this in the context of your practice, your experience as a pastor and a psychotherapist. So I think I'd like to hear Delroy talk more about how that got included in his chapter.
Yeah. The suicide in particular, I shan't mention any name because it's still very sensitive for the family. It was somebody who was well known in the community, very well known in the community, and in Sheffield, he took his own life. And I remember the family had asked me if I would do the funeral, so I said yes. I wanted to talk about distress, living with pain and distress, and somehow it just didn't register. And people have asked me, how did I get to the title of the sermon? And there is a gap. I just don't know. I don't know what happened. I was talking to somebody literally a couple of months ago about it. I still don't know. All I remember is Dr. Martin Luther King method of kind of looking at text was, I guess he looked at the situation and then he saw something in the text that could deal with it. And I remember stumbling across a text in Mark where Jesus is confronted by lawyers, I believe. And they said, what is the first and greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. And then he said, the second is like unto it. And they didn't ask for the second, they just asked for the greatest. He said, the second is like unto it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. At that time I was 58, 58. And 59. And I remember thinking, I've heard loads of sermons about loving God. I've heard loads of sermons about loving your neighbor. I have never heard a sermon about self-love, which in the world of psychotherapy is critical for our well-being, but never heard a sermon about self-love. And that's what I spoke on. And what I didn't know, so it was the largest funeral ever done. The church held 1,000 people. There was twice as many outside. And it was weeks later when I was at the gym, it was a guy who didn't know I was a pastor, but he said he was outside and he saw people come down from offices. And I didn't know any of this. And he said, as you were preaching, he said there were women. The women didn't know the guy who died, but they were crying in response to what you were talking about in terms of self-love. And after the sermon, after the service finished, I went to the reception and women came up to me and said, you know, Delroy, we realize we've made some really bad decisions in our relationship with men, but we realize largely it's down to us not loving ourselves. So we put up with anything. So then it dawned upon me that we've taken on a lot of negativity from Western society. And what's really important for us is self-love without the need of justifying our humanity to Western culture or Western society or to whiteness. We have to love who we are, and we can't depend on the resources for that to happen. We have to do that ourselves.
Tamari.
This is what I get when I talk to this brother, man. I'm telling you.
Like, wow. Wow. And I just want to shout out a wonderful lady too that Leroy, and I think both you would be great to meet. Leslie McEwen is in Ottawa. She has been a practicing Black psychotherapist for over 30 years.
Right.
So if you want an introduction, I can make that happen. She has been a true tip of the spear in this area for Blacks, not only in Canada, but I think around the world. So thank you, Leslie. And I was speaking that you were going to be in on this conversation. And also, people, please feel free to send in comments, because I think it's probably so heavy you're just taking this all in, but get it out, talk it out, share, etc. You know, Opal Inspired says, wow, well said. So that is amazing. Tamari, anything you want to add?
No,
or do you want to bring up our next friend?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's broaden it.
Okay. Well,
so,
I'll let you introduce this gentleman.
So Leroy Moore, he's the co-founder of Crip Hop Nation. So here's a bit of a story. This book, this anthology, as it stands, I put in a lot of effort to reach out to different communities. I really wanted to have contributions from folks that were gay. I did make extensive outreach to folks that were transgender, but just could not get any access or the quality of response for anyone that would be interested. But I also wanted to make it a point to have space for disabled men. Disabilities for Black people is a difficult thing. And I was coming at it from the vantage point of, I'm interested in disabilities from the vantage point of interaction with the police and the prisons, because those are very much disabling. And you look at what happened with Rodney King, for example, who ended up living with disabilities for the remainder of his life because of those interactions. And so I searched around and I encountered Leroy, who is into the arts, spoken word. And I thought, this would be really interesting to get the perspective of a disabled Black man who does his work through the arts, who does his activism around police violence through the arts. And I reached out to him. And again, like my relationship with Delroy, Leroy and I have been excellent friends since then. And I really valued working with him for his contribution to the book.
Ask and we shall receive. Good morning, Leroy. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
And hold on a second. There's something, when I read your bio, am I correct to say that you won a Grammy?
Yeah, I'm a part of this international network that I started called Crip Hop. And a couple of years ago, we had a chance to do the lead song of a documentary of the Paralympics. So wow. they came to us and we put the song together.
That's amazing. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. When Tamari reached out to you, what was the first interaction like?
Oh my God, I was so psyched. I was like, finally, being, in my 50s, I was like, finally, somebody's going to include Black disabled men, because we're not included anywhere. So when he reached out, I was like, come on, let's do it. I was on board. It's like, let's do it.
Nice. Well, I'd like you, if you could, to share about your contribution to the anthology. It's titled A Crip Hop Theory of Disabled Black Men. Tell us, what is Crip Hop theory?
Well, I want to start with a story, because I'm a storyteller. So I'm going to go back to my youth. And I was watching TV. This is back in the 70s. And I screamed to my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm on TV. I'm on TV. This is like 78, 79. My mom came out and was like, that's Porgy. I was like, Mom, I'm Porgy. I'm Porgy and Bess, because this is the first time that I saw a black physically disabled man on TV. It freaked me out, and it led me to my lifetime work chasing black disabled movements, black disabled men in police brutality, black disabled men in hip hop. So yeah, so Porgy had a big influence, in me. So hip hop started almost 20 something years ago, because I just love music. I love the blues. I liked rock before hip hop, and when hip hop hit, I was in New York, so I saw it on the corners. I was there, and I saw the diversity of it. I saw women, I saw disabled people on crutches, in the Bronx, in those ciphers. And when it became bling bling and mainstream, all the diversity went out. And I was like, where's disabled people in hip hop? So I did a radio show program back in Berkeley, California called Pushing Limits. And we did a 3-part series on hip hop and disability. And after that, I put a thing on MySpace. Facebook wasn't around, Twitter wasn't around, so it was MySpace, and it just blew up. I mean, I had people from Africa, people from Germany, Binky from Germany. I had people from the UK. It blew up outside of the U.S. first, like everything else, like James Baldwin and everything else. So yeah, so now it's been, God, I don't know, 20 something years, and hip hop is here.
That's amazing. Just want to catch up with some comments here. Welcome, DJ Dr. LJ Speaks on Instagram. Someone that Tamari and I may know, Steve's_T's, is with us. And she says, Woot, hello to you both. Myself and Tamari saying, love this. A community, she says, TEA, and civil society is where everyone is welcome. And she also says, beyond love this, Leroy. Thank you for championing the cause.
Yeah.
So that's from our Instagram. And then from our, people here, we got from YouTube, Frequency Event Promotions, #self-care. So Tamari, I'm going to ask you to lead this because you're the driving force. Let's talk about this Black men's sexuality and erotic racism with these two wonderful Black men. So I'm going to hand over a few minutes the conversation to you and take it where you'd like.
Take it where I'd like. Can I get Leroy to talk a bit about his analysis of Black disabled men as invisible? Because we tend not to see Black disabled men as sexual beings. So able-bodied Black men are imagined as hypersexual, desired, imagined as grotesque, and represented as grotesque, as Delroy talked about. But on the other side, Leroy is bringing in an alternate way of looking at invisibility, right? Because disabled Black men are invisibilized on one hand, but they're not imagined as sexual beings on the other.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. Yeah, I've been writing about this for years now. Saying that Black disabled man is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. I did a poem years ago about that. And W.E.B. Du Bois has the double consciousness. And I saw black women say, well, it's triple consciousness. And I was like, okay, if it's triple for black women, then it's quadruple for black disabled men. So I wrote a piece about that. It's on queerpopinstitute.com website. And, wrote a piece about that, wrote a poem about that. It's unfortunately hard to see, my mom, brought me up as a proud black disabled man with all my identities. But when I see black disabled men today, they just look at me and they look to the ground, because there's a lack of anything when it comes to black disabled men. Being invisible, being, asexual, in society. We can see from, Teddy Pendergrass to Curtis Mayfield, when they became disabled, they disappeared, and they had to come back and really work on, being themselves, so, yeah, and I'm so glad I think this chapter, this chapter is like one of my best writings, because it really came from finally I can, and thank God for, you, Tamari, really, editing it and really keeping my voice in it. I'm also a PhD student here at UCLA, and I realized that sometimes in the academic writing, you give your writing and you give it back and it's totally different. It's like, wow, I didn't say that, So I'm so glad that, you kept my voice, and I tell you, it's one of the powerful writings that I've ever done on a topic that it's, since seeing that Porgy in the 70s, I was like, I've been looking for an avenue to put this out. Lastly, since the 80s, I've been chasing what's called Black disabled movements. There was one in London in the UK, was hot. Was in the 80s, and I missed it by a year. I was like, Then I had a chance to go to Vancouver, Toronto, to do a lecture at Ryerson University. And I missed the Black disabled movement there for a year. So it's like, it's like chasing Black disabled movements. I miss it. Because it's not supported. It's not supported by the white disabled movement that have, all kinds of funding, and it's not supported by our Black communities. So it's kind of sad to see, like, the one in London, in Toronto, the one in South Africa, they're just not there no more. And it's like, what happened to the arts? What happened to the writing? What happened to all of that stuff? So,
I definitely have to jump in because this is epic conversation stuff. A few things. On the Instagram here, Steve_T says, we see that invisibility portrayed and the stereotype perpetrated in the media often, unfortunately. Also want to say hello to Scotian with the potion, and also Kiwi_the_terrible on the Instagram. We're going to go a little bit longer on the Instagram, but I'm going to cut it off. Go to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and catch the full conversation, and also subscribe. Got some conversation pieces, and also want to ask your permission, gentlemen. Okay, here we go. Leslie has chimed in. I hope the intersectionalities you have to navigate. Black male disability. What strength? Absolutely. And first of all, gentlemen, do I have your permission that we can go a little bit past the top of the hour? Because there's a question from the audience, and I also have a conversation piece that I'd like you guys to flush out if you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
Yeah. Go.
Okay.
Yeah, go with it.
All right. And we have Eunice Grant saying that's why it's important for Black men to talk to their spouses about their mental and physical health. Agreed. Now, this conversation piece was by Hayden, who's a regular here. He wanted the pastor speak to some of the systems of lack of self-love in Black men, but I think that's a question I'd like input from all of you. So I'm going to start with the pastor first because it was directed, but I'd like all of you to chime in, and then I have a conversation topic also. So pastor, kick it off about this conversation topic.
Sure. I think the lack of self-love, one, we don't even believe in ourselves. We don't like ourselves. And one of the things that I noticed some time ago, I was it was the end of a baby dedication, and I saw a lot of Black guys who I guess we would consider, certainly in England, they'd call yardies, so they turned up. And I saw a lot of bravado and lyrics, but somehow I saw beyond that, and I saw very, very timid men. And I think there's something about us not believing in ourselves. Also, I think another thing of self-love is it's almost as though we have to defer to others to get justification for who we are. And I'm saying that self-love doesn't demand that. Self-love means, and self-love for me is not about arrogance. It really is being confident in who we are as Black men in our skin. And we are not dependent on validation, justification for our existence from other people. So we don't have to wait for maybe white voices to give us the go-ahead to, to move forward. So quite often, again, it's lack of confidence, very insecure in terms of who we are. I hope that makes some sense in terms of lack of self-love. I guess I could go on, but I'd perhaps leave it open to other people to have a conversation as well.
Leroy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think self-love happens when you see yourself. When I saw Porgy, it changed my whole life. You know, that made me question adults. You know, because also my father was a Black Panther, and so, you know, I was raised to question authority. So, of course, you know, when I saw Porgy, when I saw my father's record collection with a lot of Black disabled blues singers that were men, you know, I brought all this to the school, like in show and tell. And of course, the teacher's like, no, put that away. We're going to go back to Christopher Columbus and Beethoven and all this stuff. And it taught me that I had to have an outside education. It taught me that education comes from everywhere, not only the four walls of the school. So because of that, and because I saw Porgy, I saw these Black blues artists, you know, that they gave me self, you know, it began to give me this self-importance. It's like, oh, I'm here, Black disabled people's here. You know, when I read about Harriet Tubman and her disability, it's like, okay, you know, all this Black disabled history. But it took myself to, well, it took my parents. I think my mom knew what she was doing when she put Porgy on. You know, she knew that she wanted me to see myself on that TV, and that changed everything. So it's really giving, you know, Black men that kind of mirror, and it's like, okay, you know, run with it, you know.
Okay. Tamari?
I'd like to take this in a slightly different direction while building on Delroy and Leroy, and that is like a neurological perspective. I think because Black people in general and Black men in particular are the front edge for the domination and the subordination of Black communities, not being able to control our images and how we're represented. Other people imagine us through the lens and the prism of their motives, their needs. And so, because we don't see ourselves in our broadest range of complexity as human beings, neurologically, our limbic systems are trained to be in fight, flight, or freeze. Because if you think about Jawanza Kanjufu talking about the conspiracy to destroy Black boys, starting in grade 3, Black boys are seen as less innocent than others. They're beginning to be seen as 5 years older than they really are. So they are adultified at the age of 10. And so their sense of themselves is an impaired sense of themselves, because the child in them is a child struggling for human recognition and validation rather than dehumanization and objectification. And that is a part of our limbic system. And I think that's where, for us as Black men, we need to come home to ourselves, as Delroy is saying, to begin that process of self-love, which means to demystify, right, a lot of the tropes that have been imposed on us, because we're literally putting on our Gideon suits when we go out our front door. That stoic, braggadocious, it is conveying a lot of insecurity and angst. And so people take that as a self-fulfilling prophecy. People need to reframe it because they're so unempathetic toward Black men. And that's one of the key things about this research project that I'm doing now. The Black women that are self-selecting to participate in this project, the key thing that I'm hearing from all of them is the word empathy. They're empathetic toward Black men. And I think Black men need to show themselves empathy.
Yeah, I was part of a project in England. Your point about neurology and the whole humanity thing. I was part of a project in Leeds, but the main project was in London, and it was the social recovery of mental illness for African Caribbean men. And one of the issues that came up repeatedly from African and African Caribbean men, that part of the thing that led them to their mental breakdown was the macho image. They felt this pressure to act in ways which they weren't, and they were saying that that's what led to them having breakdowns. Having this idea that I'm a man, I'm feeling these pains and pressures, but I can't share it with anybody. I think the lens of just looking at psychology and emotions is too narrow. Tamari's made the point quite well that neurology is really important. Not just neurology, but for me, when I talk about how things affect us as human beings, it's physiologically, the endocrine system. How does all this play a part of us? How does this all contribute to us lacking in self-love? And how does all this contribute to us not seeing ourselves positively? And it has major negative effects. But psychology and emotions alone is not enough. It's a massive impact what it's having on us as human beings, and then Black men in particular.
Absolutely. So Steve Tees on Instagram says, I believe navigating our own spaces and defining our own worth instead of looking to white supremacy for our own sense of worth, identity, and validation is imperative. Thanks for highlighting. Let's see, we got some more comments here. I've got a conversation's burning in me. Hayton Morrison says, thanks for mentioning Black Panther. I think Leroy mentioned that his dad was a Black Panther, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So just remember that. Frequency Event Promotions, says, living in a society that's ever so much evolving, the imprinting of being, quote, self-sufficient, unquote, does not really showcase taking the time to practice self-care and self-love. And also, she is here, Dr. Tachi, host of Mediascope, the livest online show about media, tech, and pop culture on 5 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays, and then 6 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and also starting the Indie Soup Network for content creators, which I'm going to be a part of. And Dr. Tachi, your name came up in the pre-show, so people are thinking about you. All right. Frequency Event Promotion says, thank you, Dr. Driver, for having this epic conversation that presents ideologies, perspective, and worldviews. Hey, it's not my conversation, it's our conversation. Just want to make sure you're aware of that. I want to ask each one of you, however comfortable you are in responding to this, how has erotic racism impacted your journey as a Black man?
Well, I won't say anything because I'm a former Pentecostal pastor. We don't talk about stuff like this. So I'll just kick off very briefly because I know we don't have much time. I think a question was asked.
Time. It's your guys' show. I'm just steering the ship. You guys are driving the ship.
Yeah, it's something we don't talk about. In fact, we don't. Certainly in the UK, as Black majority church, we don't even talk about race. So we're not going to talk about sex. In terms of impact, I can give one example. A friend of mine who Professor Tamari knows from the UK, we met at conferences, and my friend said to me one day, and I didn't even notice it. She said, she calls me, she calls me, I can't remember what name she calls me now, but anyway, she said she'd noticed that when we went to academic conferences, she said, white women gathered around me like nobody's business. And I thought I was just talking. So I said, really? She said, yeah, I've just noticed it. I've been to 2 or 3 conferences with you. Even when I met Professor Tamari in Barbados, because she was there as well. Mm-hmm. And I'd not even noticed. So I said, well, what's that about? She said, well, you're in a white space and they don't see many Black men in white spaces like this. You're articulate, you're sociable, blah, 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 blah. So in a sense, it can happen. We don't even know it's happening. So I think there's something that's going on. I think it's who wrote the book, the ISIS papers.
Frances.
Sorry.
Frances Cress Welsing.
Frances Cress Welsing.
Yeah, she talks about this tall, dark, and handsome. I'm certainly not tall. I might be dark. I think I'm handsome, but I'm not.
You are, brother. Name it and claim it. And
yeah, do you know? And the whole thing about I said it as a joke, but until I was 30, I never saw myself as being handsome at all, and now I own it. Not because I'm big-headed, but I had to do a lot of work on myself. So this whole thing around self-love is actually being able to look in the mirror and really find what pleasing at what we see in the mirror and owning it. It's not about being braggadocious and all that type of stuff, but actually it's just owning it. So in terms of kind of the eroticism, I think it's there all the time. It's whether or not we choose to engage with it or not.
Leroy?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because myself, Patty Byrne, started what's called Sins Invalid back in the early 2000s and in the Berkeley area. And we started it because we, Patty, the person of color, disabled, we never saw ourselves, as sexual beings in the art arena, in San Francisco Bay art arena. So we started, Sins Invalid just to really, put the spotlight on, sex, race, disability, and, after doing that, we just realized, it's like, wow, this is better than any protest because it's, people see the arts and the plays and music differently than they see, just a protest. I think it goes deeper to the soul. So we did our first, stage performance dealing with sexuality and disability and race, going back to our ancestors. So, from Sins Invalid, into hip hop, it's once again, if you don't see yourself, you create that space. You don't let mainstream society pin you in one spot. You create yourself. And being black and disabled, that's like all my life. You know, I created things because nothing was there. You know, before Queer Pop, I had a nonprofit for people of color with disabilities because I never saw an organization for black disabled people. You know, I saw it in the UK, I saw it in Toronto, and when I came back home, I quit my 9 to 5 and started my own organization. So that's, I mean, and especially now with the internet and stuff, you know, I tell parents, it's like, you know, school starts at home, you know. You know, get my books. I have, you know, 5 books, Black Disabled Ancestors, Black Disabled Art History 101. You know, get those books for your Black disabled daughters and sons. You know, start them off early before they go to school. Because we all know that institutions have their own politics and their own isms that they have to face. So if your child, you know, is ramped with my books and other, you know, politics before they go into school, then, you know, their foundation is you know, more stable than that.
Tamari?
You know, I'd like to take this on this issue again, focusing on the affirmative aspects of Black men's existence dealing with erotic racism. And so folks will get much from reading the preface and the introduction. It'll set up what's happening in the book. But I want to speak to another dimension of this. And I think one of someone who commented made reference to this, that I made a decision that when I was going to search for a publisher for this book, my decision was that I will speak a truth. My contributors will speak a truth. That is their truth. And something led me to reach out to Doug at University of Alberta Press, because I had worked with him before at U of T. And once I pitched the idea to him, he was like, this is a voice, a perspective, a view that must be given its due. And so University of Alberta Press worked with us like very tightly, very closely, never imposed on us, and enabled us to be free to articulate our perspective. When I look around at the academic landscape for academic publishers, beyond the people that published Tommy's book, because academic books tend to not to focus on Black men in this way. For me, this was the place and space and the time working with University of Alberta Press to be able to articulate the widest range possible of the nuanced views of people writing about Black men's experience across the world. And so for me, this is that experience of coming to terms with the possibility that our voices can be heard because we believe that they should be heard. And it can be received by a broad range of people that are willing to receive it, because there's so much pathologizing of Black men in the academy, from feminist theoreticians. I'm not going to name any names. Just read the book. You'll see that I don't hold any punches on that point. But there's so much in academia that rests on demonizing Black men, and so that's part of the pathologizing that gets projected out there. And I think that the fact that this book was published by University of Alberta Press, a university press, speaks volumes to the way that they worked with us, but also our commitment to our own voice, not to wallow in that moment of, you know, poor me, so on and so forth. No, this is a really inspiring book, and everyone brings that inspiring message to transcend and to come to terms with erotic racism in Black men's lives.
Wow. Fire, knowledge bombs are dropping. And I know this is an epic conversation because no one's leaving. I'm seeing the analytics in real time. No one's leaving. So I'm telling you, you guys are doing an outstanding job. So let's catch up on some conversations. Welcome Faces by Pureness, international makeup artist extraordinaire, but wonderful lady and wonderful mom. Number one. Eunice Graham says, amazing conversation. Faces was saying, I think when Leroy was sharing, that's awesome. We'll only go to the bottom of the hour. Family, we're probably going to have a part 2 of this. So that's why you should follow on the platforms, because there's more to come. I have 2 more conversation pieces. So first things first, how much has culture, and I'll just leave it at that, because a lot of the culture is not, our culture is not defined by us. How much has this impacted erotic racism of Black men amongst Black people?
Mm-hmm.
Am I making sense of that statement?
Yes, you are, for me.
Who wants to start on this one?
Can I start?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, I think talking about the Black community and disability, I think, and I know that the Black community is far behind when it comes to disability. I mean, because of racism in the disability community, and because of what I call Black ableism in the Black community. So because of that, unfortunately, the work of a lot of Black disabled activists don't even touch the Black community. Matter of fact, we have to leave the Black community just to do our work. So, I carry this book everywhere. I tell, matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I'm so sad it stopped, but we did a YouTube series, Black Disabled Men Talk. And one of my friends that was on that YouTube series, Otis Smith, he just loved the book. He's like, wow, this is first time reading about, Black men as political, sexual, and, my piece and our piece. But, to say all that, I think, and I think that, being a PhD student now and trying to bring disability justice into the Black community, it's so hard, and being 56 years old, it's like, come on, people. I've been doing this all my life. Come on, open up. So I think that, the work from the beginning needs to happen, especially around disability. And it needs to happen old-fashionedly. Not a hashtag movement, but it needs to be in the community, holding their hands and bringing up the community, because if we don't do that, we're going to lose another generation of Black disabled people, because our Black community is not open to Black disabled people. And you talk about sexuality, so we need to do some real work on the ground.
Who's next?
We'll let Delroy go. Yeah.
Got to unmute yourself, Delroy.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah, just
I think, sure.
Because a number of people would say that Black culture is not defined by Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
how much from your lens has the messaging, the communication of what our culture is impacted Black male sexuality and erotic racism within the Black environment?
I'm still thinking through that. It's a good question, actually. Because
well, once in a while, I come up with a good question.
No, I think let me talk about. Yeah, I can only talk about the UK. I can only not only talk because I can talk outside of the church as well and inside the church. I think certainly within church, generally speaking, it's just not discussed. Period. Even though we have a book, a Bible, which has a whole book on the gift of human sexuality, we don't discuss it. Or if we do discuss it, it's theorized, spiritualized, but not grounded in the realities of life. I'm just not sure that it's one of those unspoken aspects of our culture we just don't talk about. It's there, but we just don't talk about it whatsoever. But I think we do need to start having those conversations in a way that can be very mature. Because unfortunately, I think sometimes people think that if you're going to be talking about human sexuality, it has to be coarse and it has to be dirt, all those type of things. And it doesn't have to be. So I think there's lots of uncertainty, there's lots of fear. We don't even know how to start the conversation. And I think I mentioned when we were chatting a few days ago, just kind of do a test and everything. When I was writing the chapter, I was really scared. I was scared of my peers finding out what I was writing and them asking some serious questions about, one, my salvation and what am I writing this stuff for? How is this going to benefit people? And maybe how is it going to benefit us getting to heaven? But my view is, listen, we've got a life to live here first before we get to heaven. So listen, we need to know how to live here as effectively as possible. So I don't even think we've started to tease out the issues yet because we're not even talking about it, generally speaking. That's my view. Mm-hmm. Certainly in the UK anyways.
Tamari?
Let me respond. And again, this follows from both Leroy and Delroy. I'll talk a little bit about a woman research participant that I spoke to. When I asked her if she's aware of any Black man in her life that was sexually abused, because we have to come to terms with the fact that Black sexuality is policed, surveilled, and we engage in a kind of respectability politics around sex that is really not helpful to us, right? So one of the things that I'm trying to get at with this new research project, part of it is the resilience of Black men in terms of the narratives and the tropes, but also what happens when they were sexually abused as children. So I asked her, are you aware of any intimate or platonic relationships with Black men where they were sexually abused? She paused and she said, if I have to think about the 30 to 50 Black men in my life over the last 30 years or so that were sexually abused, she said, every single one of them disclosed that they were sexually abused as children. And the reason why she came to this conclusion is that she was having these really bad relationships with Black men that were loving but also problematic. And she thought, what's the common denominator? Her. So she thought she was the problem. So she took responsibility, went through therapy, and then realized, yeah, I had my stuff to deal with, but also all of these men, she now realizes, were indicating the markers of someone who was sexually abused as a child. And unless we come to terms with effective and meaningful age-appropriate sexual literacy for young Black boys, for them to know that when you were sexually abused at age of 7, 8, 9, or 10 by a girl or a woman that was 2 times, 3 times your age, that's not an experience. And I keep hearing from Black men who describe what happened to them when they were younger as an experience. And I said, hey, man, do you really think that that's an experience? So to answer your question, right, we need to take a step back and effectively look at what's happening with young Black boys in terms of being exposed to sexual abuse, because it's altering their capacity around sex, sexuality, and intimacy. And this is what I'm hearing coming out of this research project. So we need to look very closely what's happening with our children, and particularly our boys, to let them know that this ought not to happen to you. And if you are now a grown man looking back, it's not an experience. We don't have a language to articulate it, and that's what we need to work on if we're going to address meaningfully this issue of sex, sexuality, and intimacy in Black relationships.
I am. It's interesting when I hear the word intimacy. I remember a long time ago, someone told to me, "Into me see."
Mm-hmm.
We always think about intimacy with someone else, but into me see. We're going to hit two more conversation topics quickly because these gentlemen have lives to lead, but they will be back. They will be back. So a few comments quickly here. Dr. Tachi says this is a fantastic conversation, not often discussed in visible spaces. Eunice says diversity and inclusion is so important. We miss out on so much talent when we exclude certain people from the conversation. Manifa Books. Hello, Manifa. Thank you for having such an important and profound discussion. First of our last two conversation pieces, curious, we became familiar with Dr. Kwaban Jusfu to work around 2000, early 2000s of work of his body of work, working with young boys is out of this world. Is there anyone on your panel who's in contact with the dear doctor? So this is a yes or no answer. Is anyone in contact with him?
I'm not.
No. Okay. All right. Then I think this is a good way. Wayne Harris asks, have you seen any Black men's groups or programs that could be used as a template to across the diaspora for what you're talking about? Is there a group or any groups or any programs out there that you feel are addressing this concern, this challenge at the present time?
I know of only two in the Canadian context. There are a group of men in Nova Scotia working through barbershops, and it's called the Black Brotherhood. So they're using the barbershops as a venue to have these sorts of conversations around health, sexuality, politics. But also there's another brother in Canada, Warren Clark, who's a professor at the University of Manitoba. He's got a series that he calls Barbershop Talks. And those are spaces where these conversations are being had across cities, but he does them online. So those are the only two that come to my mind.
Yeah, Leroy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that in the UK, I'd certainly say there is a rise in barbershop conversations as well, more so than any other space, I think. One of the conversations I was in some time ago, it was young men talking about prostate cancer. Yeah. Years ago, that would never have happened. But you had guys in their late 30s, early 40s talking about prostate, and then, in the way in which they test over here in the UK. And I thought years ago, we would never have had this conversation in the open. We just wouldn't. So things are beginning to change, but not in the usual spaces.
Right. Yeah. Right. Leroy, do you know of any organizations that you see are getting closer to the target?
Really, it's that's what's so sad to say. It's like not really. There's on the Harriet Tubman Collective, but they do mostly online stuff. One of my goals for my PhD is to come out with what's called the Quip Hop Institute in the Black community, where, Black disabled political education can be taught in the Black community, mixed with the arts, mixed with the music. And that's what's missing. When, I grew up in New York, I used to go past the Schaumburg, and it's like, I tell my mom, like, one day I'm gonna be in the Schomburg, Black disabled politics only in the Schomburg. And I've been trying for years to get in that place. I still can't get in. I've been to Whitney, I've been to Yale, I've been to Ryerson, I've been to University in South Africa. I can't get into my own Black cultural spaces. So that's one reason that we are trying to build the Hip Hop Institute, not only for the Black community to get Black political education, but for these cultural centers to come to hip hop. It's like, oh, okay, Jim Crow was a real person. He was disabled. So all this history is not in Black museums. I went to the Black Museum in D.C. that opened a couple of years ago. They didn't have Braille. So I was like, how can Stevie Wonder walked in this museum? How can he enjoy it? So these are the kind of education that our Black cultural spaces need. So yeah. And and me using cultural arts and hip hop to educate. I'll leave with this music video called Dear Fight, Fight Dog, and it was that video. You can do a whole class on Blackness, disability. It's just incredible. So we can use cultural hip hop. It's the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and I haven't seen nothing around disability, and it's December. So this 50th anniversary is gonna go past, and there's nothing on disability. So.
All right. Well, I think we're going to end it there. For the people watching on IG, thank you so much, especially Steve_T's and classic_C_gems. If you want to catch the full conversation, go to the Dr. Vibe Show YouTube channel. Subscribe. I'd love you to subscribe, but you can watch the full conversation there. So the people on IG, remember, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourselves grace. Thank you. God bless. Peace to all, and keep the faith.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
No, we're not done yet. That's for Instagram people. You're still here. Don't you leave yet.
No, I'm not going yet. I'm not going yet. No, about that.
Okay, all right.
Yet. No, I'm not going yet. I'm not going yet.
Hayden Morrison says, he says, how values the barbershop to Black men vary. I don't think we need to end in so many serious conversations for Black men starts in the barbershop. Absolutely. And I just want to chime in what the gentleman just said about having the program. What we're missing is outlets in between those events. Nothing wrong, and I celebrate all these things that are happening these are one-offs. Once a Black man leaves those events, life happens. Is there an outlet? Is there a person? Is there an organization that if he has a challenge at 3:00 in the morning, who can he reach out to?
I think one of the issues that we need to contend with is how we go about doing just that, Dr. Vibe. I don't think we should necessarily count on organizations to do that work. If we have a cellular network of 5 Black men, right, who agree that they're going to either mentor or enable or assist a young Black man who's having some difficulties in life, and they would take turns being on call, right?
Yeah.
1 week, you call John. The next week, you call Steve.
Gotcha.
Right? And this is how we do this, because I heard Kevin Samuel say something one time that really was potent in my mind. He said that when older men look at younger men, they see themselves. And who they are now is a possibility for what that young man can be. So if Black men took it upon themselves to have just 5 of them, right, and make themselves available to one person for 6 months.
Okay, I'm gonna add a few quick things onto that. This is an interesting analogy that was shared to me a number of years ago. Black man, you're shaving. And probably once in a while, your son may be looking in the background. Your son is looking at what he's going to be, and you are looking at what you were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Second of all, there's a gentleman who has a fairly prominent dad's podcast online. He's non-melanated. What he does is he comprised a board of directors for him. Once a month, we get together. I'm the only Black person on the board, but he wants me on there. And basically, he gives an update on his life personally and professionally and asks for the board members' feedback. Love that idea. So I agree with you, Tamari. We don't need to look at organizations. As Leroy said, it all starts at home. So we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait for the organizations. We can start where we are right now. Just start.
And I'm not saying that to ignore the good work that organizations are doing. For example, Black Daddies Club in Toronto. Brandon Hayes doing amazing work, right? But let's say that you can't get to Toronto. You live in St. Catharines. You live in Hamilton. You live in Grimsby.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We should be able to figure out how to reach out to people like Brandon, but also at the same time to develop a cellular network of 5 men that make themselves available to one person. We can't take on everything.
You know what's interesting? I'll let you go. Go ahead, Leroy.
Also, just fighting. You talk about having groups come together and doing that work. There's so many Black men groups, in California, in Oakland, and I approached some of them, and they just don't want to deal with disability. They're scared of it.
That's a good point.
It's like, so, yeah.
Good point. Because we have to acknowledge that some may not be ready.
Yeah.
We have to accept that. We have to accept that. But those who are, make ourselves available. And I was just thinking, this is almost like Underground Railroad philosophy. They didn't look for help from they just got together in their cells long before we talk about terrorist cells, in their cells, and they did it on their own. So like there's an old song by the group Doobie Brothers called Taking It to the Streets. Well, let's take it to our streets and make that happen. But I love it. But gentlemen, it's going to be a wrap for now because there's going to be a part 2, but I want to get final comments from each one of you and tell us how people can get in touch with you. So who would like to start first with final comments?
Final comments. Listen, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm teasing you about. I'm a former Pentecostal pastor. We don't talk about stuff. I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years. We have to talk about stuff, and I think sometimes it causes a problem with some of the traditionalists, the younger people and the kind of new people to faith really kind of. Well, they understand they're living in the real world, and we have to kind of deal with things on a real way. So you can contact me through my website, or if not, my other email address. If I've been having problems lately the last few days, but it's really easy. delroyhall51@gmail.com. That's my personal email. You can get me through with that, no problem at all.
All right.
Dr. Tamari and Dr. Leroy and Dr. Vibe, of course. Brilliant, thank you.
Leroy, final words.
Yeah, final word is that, talking to the Black community solely is that we have to get over Black ableism, and we have to be open to Black disabled people, and really support the work. Like I said, I'm trying to start this Crip Hop Institute here in LA. It's going to take much dollars, much time, but we're doing it. We have a piece of land in Tanzania that Crip Hop and the Crip Hop Tanzania chapter purchased. So, we're trying to make some moves to have this Crip Hop institute internationally, because it could be a model. I think we're doing the UN's work. The UN passes these treaties, but who's gonna really enforce these treaties on the ground? And I think that's what Crip Hop is doing.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And there's website, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok all there. Website, criphopinstitute.com, Facebook, Leroy Moore, and Instagram and TikTok at Black Crip. That's KRIP. Thank you very much. Professor Tamari, take us home.
My final words. I'm really encouraging people to assist me and to contribute to a research project around erotic racism and how it's affecting Black men. I want to hear more from Black men, so they can go to my website at tkitossa.ca and go to the research tab. And for non-Black men, Black women, white women, Asian women, whatever, if you are with a Black man, you love a Black man, your voice is important to help us comprehend how people are navigating these stereotypes, because it is determining their lives in ways that possibly some do not quite understand. But as I've talked to people through this project, they've become much more aware, and they've told me that it's really cathartic. It's really helping them to process how these images and these representations are shaping their lives, and how they have in fact been resilient and are resilient.
Excellent.
So I want to thank Delroy, Leroy, and you, of course, Dr. Vibe. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And to your audience, thank you so much.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And your research project is a global venture, correct?
Absolutely.
Just want to
worldwide.
I don't make assumptions. All right. So if you like what you heard, we're going to try to have them all back. Well, we will have them all. Not trying. We will have them all back. Plus, if you want to see their writings, pick up the book. That is the website address where you can buy the book. Appealing, because he is appealing Black masculinities, colonialism, and erotic racism. There's other contributors also, not just these two gentlemen. So encourage you to pick up the book, support. And remember, it's for Black men and those who love them. And we have to also realize that there are many Black men that are screaming and nothing's coming out. So we need to let them get it out. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking time for today's conversation. To you and your loved ones and what you're doing, past, present, and future, make sure, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and make sure you give yourselves grace. Ashe.
Thank you, Dr. Vibe.
Bob, thank you.
You're very welcome. There we go. And all right. That was an epic conversation. You think? You think? That was epic. I want to say thank you for everyone who watched live on the replay. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. So a few last comments that we have here. Let's see. Opal Inspired says, thank you, gentlemen, for this very, very important conversation. Wayne Harris says, thanks. Dr. Tati says, the land purchase in Tanzania is excellent. She also has to say, thank you so much for this conversation. Hayden says, agree, Eunice. It's just that the barbershop is a very safe space for Black men, maybe the only one. And then Fitness IQ Cam says, what a discussion. Absolutely. All right, family. that's a wrap on today's show. Wow. I'm full. Spiritually, very, very full. So just want to leave off with a few things as we sign off for today. And subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and also the notification button. Also follow the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And also share it out. Share it out. If you want to advertise your business, product, or service on this platform or any of the platforms that I host, please feel free to email me, dr.vibe@thedrbeshow.com. And then join the Morning Vibe Discord group. Please email me, dr.@thedrbeshow.com, and also be putting up the replay link for the conversation in the Discord group. Coming up on Monday's show, we have David Archer, Black psychotherapist out of Montreal, and we're actually going to be doing a mock visit or mock, visit or I'm looking for the word and I can't find it. Session, that's the word, a mock session with David and Ryan. Ryan's going to be the patient. So you want to make sure you catch that. All right. So as you see on the bottom, you can catch replays of this epic conversation on the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook and YouTube. Also the Afro Caribbean Business Network, Facebook and YouTube, and Ryan Oneil Knight, YouTube and LinkedIn. Ryan unfortunately could not make it today, but please follow him wherever he is appearing. So that's it. We got that. We're done. And let's do this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith and walk good. Have a great weekend if you are watching this before the weekend. Take care.